More, I'm not talking about buildings or denominational labels. I'm talking about cultures, patterns that shape hearts. Churches can carry life, more, and churches can carry drift. Three kinds are especially dangerous because they feel good on the surface, yet hollow you out beneath it. More, the comfort-only church, the hype and noise church, and the celebrity-centered church. More, comfort without conviction is one of the most subtle dangers to the human soul because it doesn't look like danger at all. In fact, it feels safe, more soothing and welcoming. It offers a gentle hand on the shoulder, telling you that everything is fine just the way it is, that no change is needed. More, that growth is optional. At first it feels like love, but beneath the surface it can slowly smother the very hunger that leads to true transformation. More, a heart that is never stretched by truth becomes a heart that eventually stops beating with spiritual life. More, when a community or a church builds its entire atmosphere around comfort without pressing its people toward conviction. More, it builds a people who are satisfied with being unchanged. And the tragedy is this comfort without conviction may keep you warm for a moment. More, but it leaves you unprepared for the storm. Think of what happens to a muscle that is never exercised. It weakens. It shrinks. More, it loses its capacity to carry weight. In the same way, a faith that is never tested by conviction or challenged by truth becomes fragile. More, it may look peaceful on the outside, but beneath the surface, there is no strength to endure trials, temptations, or losses. More, conviction is not meant to harm us. It is meant to awaken us. It is the voice that says, "Don't settle here. There's more for you." More, leave behind the weight that keeps you bound. Yet when conviction is silenced in the name of comfort, we remain in the very chains we came to escape. More, the soul that could have risen higher stays sleeping, lulled by words that soothe but never stir. More, another subtle danger is that comfort-only teaching can twist the meaning of love. Love begins to sound like endless approval rather than relentless rescue. More, but real love does not leave you where it found you. Real love enters the pit but also lifts you out. More, a church or community that only soothes you but never challenges you is like a doctor who compliments you while ignoring the disease spreading in your body. More, at first, you might feel relieved, but in the end you pay with your health. Spiritual comfort without conviction works the same way. More, it avoids the hard conversations. It softens the call to turn from destructive paths, and it replaces transformation with affirmation. More, the result is a generation of people who feel secure but remain spiritually sick. Comfort without conviction also dulls discernment. More, when you stop being challenged, you stop noticing the difference between truth and counterfeit. Your conscience grows quiet. More, things that should trouble your spirit begin to feel normal. Gradually, compromise doesn't look like compromise anymore. It looks like balance. More, but in reality, you're simply drifting further from the anchor of truth. More, and when storms come, and they will come, your foundation crumbles because it was built on ease, not endurance. More, the words that once made you feel good suddenly have no power to hold you when life tests you with fire. But here's the deeper truth. More, conviction is not your enemy, it is your protector. It is the refining fire that clears away what weakens you and leaves behind what strengthens you. More, without conviction you cannot grow roots. Without roots you cannot bear fruit. Without fruit, your life has no lasting impact. More, that is why communities and churches that remove conviction from their message are spiritually dangerous. More, they keep people comfortable while their spiritual strength quietly withers. They produce crowds, not disciples. They nurture attendance, not transformation. And though numbers may grow, souls remain asleep. The question for each of us is simple but piercing. More, do we want to be comforted into sleep or convicted into life? One path feels easier in the moment but empties us in the end. More, the other may feel uncomfortable, even painful at times, but it sharpens, purifies, and awakens us to the fullness we were meant to live. More, if we want lasting strength, we cannot run from conviction. We must embrace it as a gift, a hard gift, More, but one that prepares us to stand firm when everything else shakes. Comfort without conviction is dangerous not because it screams falsehood, more, but because it whispers half-truths, and half-truths never set a soul free. More noise without nourishment is a trap that lures people with energy, but leaves them empty when the lights dim. It appeals to our emotions, more, to our longing for excitement, to our craving for something that feels alive. And yes, there is nothing wrong with joy, passion, more, celebration. Those are gifts. But when joy is disconnected from depth, it becomes a temporary high rather than a lasting strength. More. The danger of a hype-driven church is not that it is lively, but that it replaces substance with spectacle. More. It leaves you hungry while convincing you that you are full. More. You walk out with your hands lifted high but your heart unprepared to stand firm in the silence of everyday life. More. The problem is not passion itself, it is passion without roots. A tree may look alive in spring with its bright leaves, but if its roots are shallow, more, the first drought exposes its fragility. In the same way, when believers are trained to depend only on noise and atmosphere, more, their spiritual lives stay surface level. They need constant stimulation to feel secure, and when the music stops, they feel abandoned. Prayer feels boring. Study feels heavy. Silence feels uncomfortable. In reality, those are the very practices that nourish the spirit. More, but when a church prioritizes entertainment over equipping, it teaches people to chase experiences instead of building endurance. More, spiritual maturity cannot be microwaved in a moment of euphoria. It is cultivated in the quiet consistency of daily faithfulness. More, the danger of noise without nourishment is also how it reshapes expectations. People start to believe that God is only present when the room is loud. More, the crowd is swaying and the emotions are high. They look for him in the thunder, but forget he often speaks in a whisper. When the highs fade, more, they assume God has left, when in fact he is calling them to find him in stillness. That creates a fragile faith that constantly needs another event, more, another gathering, another emotional surge to keep going. Instead of becoming disciples who walk daily with God, more, people become consumers of spiritual entertainment, always consuming, never cultivating. Another cost is how it reshapes leadership. More, when the measure of effectiveness becomes the size of the crowd or the level of noise, leaders feel pressured to perform rather than to shepherd. More, messages become motivational talks instead of calls to transformation. Worship becomes a concert rather than an offering. And gradually, more, the purpose of gathering is lost. Instead of being equipped for the battles of life, people are simply entertained for the length of a service. More, and when life hits with loss, temptation, or struggle, the memory of that noise cannot shield them. More, what was supposed to prepare them has instead left them exposed. Noise without nourishment also breeds dependency. More, if you can only feel close to God when someone else is stirring the atmosphere, you haven't yet learned how to carry his presence into your own home. More, your workplace, your personal struggles. The goal of true spiritual teaching is to form people who can stand strong in the quiet, more, who can endure the long seasons when nothing looks spectacular. The gatherings should be refueling stations, not crutches. More, they should point people back to their own secret place of prayer and devotion, not keep them hooked on borrowed fire. More, the truth is that nourishment doesn't always feel exciting, but it sustains you, just as healthy food may not always taste as thrilling as sugar. More, it gives your body the strength to live. In the same way, the steady diet of truth, prayer, accountability, more, and obedience may not feel as dazzling as lights and music, but it builds resilience that survives storms. More, a faith that has nourishment may rejoice in the noise, but it doesn't depend on it. It can celebrate with the crowd. More, but it can also stand alone with courage. That is the difference between hype and holiness. One fades with the sound, the other endures with silence. More noise without nourishment is dangerous because it promises fire but delivers smoke. True life is found not in borrowed highs but in rooted hearts. More personality over presence is one of the most subtle and spiritually dangerous shifts that can take place in a church. At first, it looks like honor, it looks like admiration, respect, and even love for the leaders who stand before the people. But when the focus shifts from the presence of God to the personality of a leader, everything slowly begins to tilt off balance. People start coming not to encounter transformation, but to be entertained, inspired, or impressed by a figure on stage. The person becomes the magnet, the brand, the symbol of faith, while the very presence that gives life takes second place. And though the crowd may grow and the atmosphere may feel electric, the roots beneath are shallow because they are planted in charisma, not in the spirit. The danger lies in how natural it feels. People are wired to look up to leaders, to admire those with gifts, eloquence, or vision. But when admiration crosses the line into dependency, when faith becomes attached to a human rather than to God, the church stops being a living body and starts becoming an audience. The leader becomes the star, and the people become fans. The problem is not leadership itself. Healthy leadership is essential, but leadership without accountability, without humility, and without the continual pointing back to the presence is toxic. Instead of being shepherds who guide, such leaders become icons who dominate. And instead of disciples being formed, spectators are produced. This creates a cycle of shallow spirituality. People are fed by someone else's fire, but never learn how to build their own. They measure their growth by how close they feel to a leader rather than how deeply they walk with God. And when that leader falters, as every human eventually does, their faith collapses because it was built on a personality instead of on eternal presence. Whole communities are shaken, not because God changed, but because the anchor was tied to a man or woman who could never bear the weight of worship. Another subtle danger is how it warps values within the church. When personality takes center stage, image management becomes more important than truth. Leaders become untouchable, and any questioning is seen as disloyalty. Followers are more concerned with defending the figurehead than discerning the fruit. Gradually humility fades, confession disappears, and transparency is replaced with polish. A culture of performance grows. Leaders perform on stage, and members perform in their devotion to the leader. The presence is no longer the standard, the personality is. And in that environment, real transformation is stifled because everyone is too busy protecting the image rather than seeking the truth. But the real tragedy is how it steals from the people themselves. A church built around personality can be full of activity yet empty of authenticity. It looks alive, but it doesn't produce lasting disciples. It excites people for an hour, but doesn't equip them for a lifetime. It celebrates the gift of the leader, but forgets the giver of all gifts. And in the end, people are left unprepared, unable to stand on their own, because they were never taught to lean into the presence that never fails. True leadership never builds fans, it builds followers of God. True teaching doesn't magnify the teacher, it magnifies the presence. True shepherds don't want the sheep to depend on them forever. They want the sheep to know the voice of the shepherd himself. A healthy church doesn't orbit around one person's charisma. It gathers around God's presence, where every heart is shaped, every soul is convicted, and every life is transformed. Personality fades, but presence remains. Charisma can inspire for a moment, but only presence sustains for eternity. That is why personality over presence is spiritually dangerous. It promises life, but gives dependence. It attracts crowds, but weakens roots. It creates excitement, but leaves emptiness. The antidote is simple, but costly. Keep the presence above everything else. Honor leaders, but worship God. Learn from people, but depend on His Spirit. Celebrate gifts, but never let them eclipse the giver. Because in the end, it is not a personality that will sustain you in trials. It is not charisma that will carry you in the storm. It is the presence, steady, holy, more eternal, that makes you unshakable. Healthy churches are not defined by the size of their gatherings, the polish of their programs, more, or the strength of their branding. They are defined by the fruit they cultivate in the lives of people. More, a truly healthy community does not stop at drawing crowds or inspiring emotions. It goes deeper, building lives of substance. More. And this happens through three pillars that must always remain in place: repentance, accountability, and discipleship. Without these, a church becomes a place of gathering, but not of growth. With them, it becomes a place where transformation is not just talked about, but lived out. Repentance is the doorway to real change. It is not just about saying sorry, nor is it about guilt for the sake of guilt. Repentance is the courageous act of turning away from destructive patterns and turning toward life. A healthy church does not avoid this topic for fear of offending. Instead, it embraces it as the beginning of freedom. People are not coddled in their brokenness. They are guided out of it with love and truth. This may feel uncomfortable at first, but the discomfort of repentance is far lighter than the chains of staying the same. When repentance is taught and practiced, the church becomes a hospital where wounds are exposed and healed, not a lounge where pain is ignored. Accountability is the structure that keeps repentance alive. Anyone can make a decision in a moment, but sustaining that decision requires community. A healthy church refuses to let people walk alone. It places people in relationships where honesty is welcomed, where correction is given in love, and where encouragement fuels endurance. This doesn't mean judgment or control, it means mutual support. Accountability means someone cares enough to notice when you are drifting and loves you enough to call you back. Without it, repentance fades into memory. With it, repentance becomes a lifestyle that shapes character day by day. Churches that lack accountability create isolated believers who may look strong on the outside, but are fragile on the inside. But churches that build systems of accountability form believers who can endure storms, temptations, and trials because they have shoulders to lean on and voices to call them higher. The third pillar is discipleship. A healthy church doesn't stop at saving souls, it trains them. It does not aim to create spectators who watch from the pews, but disciples who walk out into the world carrying light. Discipleship is the daily work of teaching people how to pray, how to serve, how to study, how to forgive, how to lead families, how to resist temptation, how to walk with integrity. It's not flashy, and it doesn't always feel exciting, but it is what builds lasting maturity. Without discipleship, people remain spiritual infants no matter how long they have been in church. With discipleship, they grow into leaders, mentors, and servants who multiply their impact beyond the walls of the building. When repentance, accountability, and discipleship work together, the church becomes a training ground for spiritual strength. People no longer depend only on weekly gatherings, they live out their faith daily. The measure of success is not how many people fill the room, but how many lives reflect lasting change. A church like this doesn't just talk about love, it practices forgiveness. It doesn't just celebrate worship, it walks in obedience. It doesn't just honor leaders, it equips every member to lead in their own sphere. Healthy churches are rare because they require courage. It's easier to avoid hard truths than to preach repentance. It's easier to let people walk alone than to build systems of accountability. It's easier to keep people entertained than to disciple them. But the easy way produces weak faith. The courageous way produces resilient believers. That is why healthy churches may not always look impressive on the outside, but they are powerful on the inside. They produce men and women who are not shaken by storms, not swayed by culture, and not dependent on personality. Instead, they are rooted, growing, and multiplying life wherever they go. That is what makes healthy churches different. They are not content with temporary excitement, they are committed to eternal transformation. Discernment tests fruit, not flash. In a world where appearances are polished, lights are bright, and words are carefully crafted, it can be easy to mistake outward display for inner health. More. Yet true discernment does not settle for surface impressions. It asks what is being produced here, what kind of character is being formed. More, what kind of lives are being shaped. A tree is known by its fruit, not by the shine of its leaves. And in the same way, more, a church or a leader is known by the fruit of humility, integrity, prayer, and service, not by the flash of performance, the size of the crowd, more, or the weight of applause. The challenge is that flash is always louder. It dazzles, it excites, it demands attention. More, you can be drawn to the energy of a room, the eloquence of a voice, or the scale of a production and assume that it is evidence of life. More, but discernment looks beyond the noise and asks, does this produce lasting change? More, do people leave more in love with God or simply more impressed with a person? Are marriages being restored, addictions broken, integrity strengthened? More, forgiveness practiced, compassion multiplied, or are we simply entertained for an hour and unchanged the next day? The fruit reveals the truth. More, and no amount of flash can cover rotten roots for long. Humility is one of the first fruits to look for. More, a community rooted in humility does not exalt its leaders as untouchable figures, but keeps them accountable as fellow servants. More, humility is seen when leaders admit weakness, seek counsel, and invite correction. It's seen when the spotlight is used to highlight others, more, not just themselves. Without humility, pride begins to rot the core, and eventually it spills out in scandal or control. But where humility is present, more, you find a safe environment where people are free to grow without fear of comparison or judgment. Integrity is another fruit. More, integrity means consistency. What is preached on the stage is lived in the private life. A church or leader marked by integrity is not perfect. More, but they are authentic. They do not pretend to have arrived, they walk in honesty, even about their struggles. More, integrity shows up in how finances are handled, how conflicts are addressed, how promises are kept, and how people are treated when no one is watching. More, without integrity, the flash may continue for a season, but it will eventually collapse because truth cannot be hidden forever. More, prayer is another test of fruit. Flashy churches can substitute performance for prayer. More, filling schedules with programs, but neglecting the posture of seeking God. But a praying community is one that remains alive even when no one sees. More, prayer produces a dependence that no amount of planning can replace. It shapes hearts to listen, not just to speak. Where prayer is alive, more, the presence is felt not only in the big gatherings but also in the daily lives of its people. It is a fruit that sustains in silence, when flash fades away. And then there is service. Service reveals whether love is real or only spoken. Flash loves the stage, but service loves the unseen. More, a healthy church is not known by how many sit in its pews, but by how many serve outside its walls. It cares for the poor, the lonely, the forgotten. More, it honors the weak, not just the powerful. Service cannot be fake for long because it demands sacrifice. More, and sacrifice always reveals the true posture of the heart. Discernment is not cynical, it is wise. More, it does not reject every sign of growth or every display of excellence, but it tests them by fruit. It asks, does this excellence lead to humility or pride? More, does this growth lead to service or self-promotion? Does this energy lead to prayer or performance? Discernment sees through the flash to the core. More, and it is that core which determines whether something is spiritually safe or spiritually dangerous. At the end of the day, the question is simple. More, does it bear fruit that lasts? Crowds, noise, and charisma can come and go, but the fruit of humility, integrity, prayer, and service will remain. More, and it is by these fruits that we discern the difference between what dazzles for a moment and what transforms for eternity. More, your spiritual health is worth guarding, worth more than comfort, more than convenience, more than the approval of a crowd. More, many people treat their spiritual lives casually, as though attending a service or listening to a message once a week is enough to sustain them. More, but spiritual health is like physical health. It requires vigilance, discipline, and consistent care. No one drifts into strength by accident. More, it is cultivated intentionally, and because the condition of your spirit influences every part of your life, your relationships, your decisions, more, your resilience, your peace, it must be guarded above all else. To neglect it is to leave the most important part of yourself unprotected. More, guarding your spiritual health begins with awareness. Too often, people notice the decline only when the damage has already been done, when apathy has crept in, when temptations feel overwhelming, when joy feels absent. But just as the body shows early signs of sickness, the soul also shows warnings: loss of passion for prayer, disinterest in truth, attraction to what once felt wrong, comfort in mediocrity. Guarding your spirit means paying attention to those signals instead of ignoring them. It means refusing to numb yourself with distractions and choosing instead to ask the hard questions. Am I growing or drifting? Am I being sharpened or dulled? Am I walking in truth or just coasting in habit? One of the ways to guard your spiritual health is by choosing carefully the community you belong to. A spiritually weak or dangerous environment can slowly reshape you without you realizing it. If you surround yourself with people who only chase comfort, you will begin to do the same. If you place yourself under teaching that prioritizes noise over nourishment, your roots will stay shallow. If you anchor yourself to personalities instead of presence, your faith will collapse when they fall. But when you plant yourself in a healthy, truth-centered community, you give your soul room to grow strong. The people around you matter because they influence the direction of your walk. Guarding your spirit means being intentional about where and with whom you grow. Guarding your spiritual health also means discipline in private. What you do when no one is watching reveals whether your strength is real or borrowed. Public faith without private devotion is fragile. It may impress others, but it will not sustain you when the storm hits. The quiet practices of prayer, reflection, obedience, and service are not glamorous, but they are the foundations of strength. They nourish your inner life in ways no stage or spotlight ever can. Just as athletes train daily so their strength is ready when needed. Guarding your spiritual health means training your spirit daily so you can endure trials with stability. Another element is boundaries. Not everything that looks good is good for your soul. Guarding your spirit means being willing to say no to unhealthy influences, toxic voices, and distractions that pull you away from truth. It means choosing not to feed your heart with content that weakens your convictions. It means refusing to let bitterness, envy, or pride take root. Just as you would guard your body against poison, you must guard your spirit against compromise. And this guarding is not done out of fear but out of wisdom, because you recognize the value of what is at stake. Guarding your spiritual health means remembering the bigger picture. Your life is not just about surviving day to day. It is about living with purpose, bearing fruit and leaving a legacy. Weak spiritual health limits your impact. Strong spiritual health multiplies it. When your inner life is whole, your outer life becomes a testimony. You influence not just by words but by presence, not just by speeches but by example. And in this way, your spiritual health doesn't just guard you, it blesses others. Your soul is precious, your calling is weighty, and your spiritual health is too valuable to be left unguarded. Build it, protect it, and invest in it. For in the end, all the flash, all the noise, all the personalities will fade, but the strength of your spirit will carry you through every storm and into every promise. The danger of these kinds of churches is not always obvious. They do not always shout falsehood. Sometimes they simply whisper half-truths. Comfort without conviction makes people feel safe but leaves them unchanged. Noise without nourishment excites the emotions but starves the soul. Personality over presence dazzles the crowd but weakens the roots of faith. And when repentance, accountability, and discipleship are missing, when humility, integrity, prayer, and service are overshadowed by flash, the result is not transformation but distraction. But you were not created to live distracted, shallow, or dependent. You were made to be strong, to stand in storms, more to grow deep roots that bear lasting fruit. That is why your spiritual health must be guarded at all costs. Where you plant yourself matters, more who you follow matters, and what you feed your soul matters. A church that truly heals is one that calls you higher, equips you to endure more, and points you always back to the presence that never fails. So ask yourself, am I being comforted into sleep or convicted into life? More, am I chasing noise or building nourishment? Am I following personalities or living in the presence? More, the answers will shape your future more than you realize. Choose carefully, grow intentionally, and guard your soul fiercely. Because in the end, more, the strength of your spirit will not come from the flash of a stage, but from the quiet power of a life rooted in truth, humility, and love. That is the kind of strength no storm can take away.